Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The cannons shall be singing today as we have the Vampire Coast versus the Dark Elves. We have PrussianPrince is leading the forces of the Vampire Coast, and we have IcePower leading his Dark Elves. So yeah, the Vampire Coast generally very much favored in this matchup. But for the army lineups we have today, we have triple carronades for the Vampire Coast. Frontline is going to be a trio of zombie hard deck cannon mobs with a fourth unit kind of a little off to the side. We have triple bombers in support of them, and then we have 5 handguns dotted around the field. Quite amount of firepower to be seen. We have some Morngulls also kind of sitting in the back to provide a little bit of support for these cannons against any potential cavalry rushes. We have, of course, Luther Harkon up in the sky on his Terrorgeist. Very common pick in this matchup. And we have a Vampire Fleet Captain of Vampires bringing Invocation of the Heck, Raise Dead, and Taunt as well to hopefully slow down a bit of the cavalry pressure that they will be seeing. And for the Dark Elves, we have triple Reaper Bolt Throwers. A very good pick, especially against the Vampire Coast artillery pieces. They do very well, and they trade very well also against the artillery, especially the mortars, which you'll commonly see. But they do very well against the other pieces, cannons, Queen Bess, and the like. For the front line, we have 4 Bleak Swords, and behind them we have a trio of Dread Spears to provide a little bit of secondary support against potential Morngulls or anything of that nature. And then we have Dark Shards, 4 of those, kind of a staple of IcePower's build. He definitely prefers those over the Shades, who do have stock and are generally preferred in this matchup because of that ability. We also have some Witch Elves to provide a little bit of rampaging, especially if Luther decides to swoop on into any of the engagements. And then for the backline, we have 3 Dark Riders with shields for the mobility department and a 4th unit way off into the corner, providing a little bit of Vanguard shenanigans. And that will wrap things up for the army as we get things underway, and the cannons have opened up, already taking, or not quite yet, doing quite a bit of damage to these Reaper Bolt Throwers. And they shots continuing to rain in and doing some good work to the crew and clipping some of these Bleak Swords along the way. So pretty much the Vampire Coast is content to kind of sit back and fire away, still maintaining all of the artillery pieces, though it looks like one just dropped on those Reaper Bolt Throwers, so they are down to 2. So far things are looking pretty decent for the Vampire Coast. As I say that, one of the units does drop to a focus fire from the Reaper Bolt Throwers, and a overcasted fireball coming in, striking one of the units, taking that down. As I did kind of forget initially of the Supreme Sorceress of Fire, who is a staple pick from IcePower, coming in with the Fireball, Burning Head, and Flaming Sword. But a very nice charge into the rear of these carronades. No response from PrussianPrince from that initial engagement. These gunnery these handguns are unable to really fire into support, and these are kind of momentarily tied up as well. The Morngulls are starting to swing in, and IcePower will pull out his Dark Riders to save them for the late game, as more shots from the Reaper Bolt Throwers and another Fireball. That one does miss the artillery piece, so it's still down to 2, but the Reaper Bolt Throwers does claim another victim, taking out one of these carronades. And the Vampire Coast does decide to advance, kind of realizing they are losing that artillery engagement. Cannons not really finding any of their targets, only taking out 2 of the Reaper Bolt Throwers. So they still have 7 left, but on the cannon side, as they have just lost another unit, they are down to, they still have their 3, but they are crumbling. We only have 1 and 2 left on the field. So things are not looking good for the ranged firepower. Another fireball coming right in, a very staple pick for IcePower. That fireball, especially from the elevated position that the Supreme Sorceress is on this current setup, able to snipe out this carronade completely. So we still have only 4 carronades firing in, and the Reaper Bolt Throwers still have 7 total units. Now the Dark Shards are opening up on Luther, who has got a little ahead of himself getting into that front engagement. A burning head going down from Ice Power. However, the units were already pretty much moving up, so Prussian Prince was able to avoid that cast. Very lucky indeed. Losing the bombers could have spelled doom for his army in the early stages of this engagement. Though now the bombers will slowly start to kind of get a little bit in range of the units. The big swords are kind of pushing back or pulling back a little bit as the Dark Shards are trying to focus down these bombers as best they can to eliminate them before they get into their frontline engagement, though these bombers have opened up, taking out a meaty chunk of HP from these Bleak Swords. Cavalry, these Dark Riders with shields have gotten into one of the units of bombers, but the overwhelming firepower from these two handgun units pretty much instantly shatter that Dark Riders unit. So I'm not really sure if that's really a good trade there. Yes, you're able to do quite a bit of damage, but if you were able to take out those bombers, maybe that could have been worth it. But otherwise, that overwhelming firepower just absolutely shredded those units. A summon coming down from the Vampire Fleet Captain, trying to get some fire onto the Supreme Sorceress of Fire before she's able to take off again. Though the bomber is doing very good work, pretty much deleting a lot of the Bleak Swords units. All these handguns a little probably too close to the front line, so these zombie Decadent mobs are not really getting the support they need to deal with those Bleak Swords. Bleak Swords will win that engagement, but otherwise these other two handguns units are clear to fire, firing in, at least routing another of the Dark Riders units. Morngul's onto these Dark Riders. Morngul's actually do very well against Dark Elf cavalry units. Another burning head missing these three handguns does clip one of them, doing some decent damage, able to at least start crumbling on that unit. One bomber is about to drop right now to the firepower from the Dark Shards, though at what cost? Because the Supreme Sorceress of Fire is getting very low, just getting out of range of the handgun units before she takes critical damage. But otherwise, yeah, these Morgul is able to at least push off these units of Dark Riders. They do lack the speed to catch them, though in a single engagement they will win against any of the Dark Rider variants. One unit of Dark Riders able to get onto one of the handguns, but getting onto one handgun is kind of dangerous because you do have two other handguns firing point blank range, instantly shattering this other unit of Dark Riders. So that's really been kind of the story so far. Ice Power's been trying to get into the back line, getting into those handguns. He is getting those charges off, but there's just so many handguns that they just completely destroy any attempts to do so. One of which, this is a summon unit, in which these Joy Spears are getting into, so Prussian Prince will gladly take this charge as his other handgun units just focus down these Dread Spears, going to be routing them very soon. But if you take a look at the traditional frontline troops of the Vampire Coast, the zombies are all gone. There is no frontline troops left for the Vampire Coast. It is just ranged units. We do have just the Carronade crew, but otherwise the bolt throwers are still online. We still have two of those. Here comes the Supreme Sorceress of Fire. I think she still needs to stay away from this engagement. She cannot get any close, but she does get close enough just to cast a Burning Head, and it does kind of go through at least one of the units, an Invocation quickly going down to preserve that unit. The other two units mostly dodging it. The third unit, I suppose, getting clipped as well, taking quite a bit of damage, and will be crumbling from that damage. Though if we kind of swing out, we do have Luther still at pretty much, well, decent health, and he is on his Terror Guy, so he'll be regenning, at least for the time being. Morngul's trying to pull out, does not want to be taking sustained fire from 3 Dark Shard units, and we do have the Witch Elves, which if they are able to get engaged with these Morngul's, we'll be able to rampage them and keep them in engagement to allow those Dark Shards to completely destroy what is left of their HP. But otherwise, if we take a look, we do see the Supreme Sorceress is taking fire right now, getting a little too close to the sun, and she is going to be routing from the fire of these handgun units as this summoned unit is turning and firing and does finish off the Supreme Sorceress. And that is going to be all of the leadership for the Dark Elves. They still have quite a bit of ammo in their Dark Shards. They still have their Witch Elves. Reaper Bolt Throwers are very low on ammo, and some very haggard infantry units. But otherwise, for the Vampire Coast, it is just range units that is left. So as long as the Dark elves are able to get into those units and are able to shut them down, they should have a nice decent chance. But if you take a look over here, these Morghuls have rampaged into these witch elves, and we have Luther Harkon also engaged. Very dangerous for him because he can get rampaged as well, especially these witch elves. They're not routing as quickly as the Vampire Coast would like. And there goes that rampage on Luther Harkon, and here is the sharks in the water. We have 4 of the Dark Shards approaching. 2 of them are already in range of Luther and firing away, as well as these Reaper Bolt Throwers. And that focus fire is absolutely devastating, taking off pretty much half of what Luther has left in terms of HP. These witch elves are kind of refusing to break, and with how much damage Luther has taken, he's actually probably rampaged for a second time, and he is down to critical low. He is currently crumbling. He is only down to 800 health. Another volley or 2 might be enough to put the nail in the coffin for the Vampire Coast leadership and provide the Dark Elves a way back into this game. But Luther is refusing to die on a sliver of HP left as the Dark Riders are starting to peel back as the Morghuls try to put some pressure on them. I think the Dark Shards just needed to continue firing in. Luther is just so close to death. He is down to 400 HP right now, still crumbling away, taking in shots from the Dark Shards as he's just able to get out of range of them. And the rest of the handgun units have actually been able to shut down the Reaper Bolt Throwers, pretty much routing them across the board. The crew is coming back on that one model, though they are far from their artillery pieces. Dark Shards focusing down these Morghuls at close range as the Vampire Fleet Captain is kind of stuck in the middle of all these ranged units, chasing one unit, but that allows the other units to turn and fire as soon as they are done with these Morghuls, who have just disintegrated into the ground. Balance power, yes, is very much in the Vampire Coast favor, and that is because Luther has just been able to stabilize his leadership. Yes, he is very, very low. He is down to only 300 HP, but he is regenerating. Not a whole lot left that he can regen, only 400 HP. And that will be the limit of what he can heal for the match. Balance power actually just shifted a little bit back into the Dark Elves' favor, still very much in the Coast favor. But that is due to the ammo that is left on these handgun units. Let's see, because that should be just it for the Vampire Coast. These 3 handguns. We have the Vampire Fleet Captain and Luther, who is on critical low health. A single volley from a single Dark Shard might be enough to finish him, but I think the overwhelming firepower that these 3 handgun units provide is going to be too much for the Dark Shards to deal with, especially considering that they don't rout. They'll only start to crumble and still continue firing in, even if their leadership is broken. Well, if the leadership is broken on the Dark Shards, that will be curtains for them, especially considering this unit is pretty much out of ammo. The other 2 units have a decent amount of ammo left, but the Vampire Fleet Captain is at least trying to shut down this one unit, providing enough leadership penalty to potentially rout them. And it does look like this battle will be going the way of the Vampire Coast, as army losses will trigger for the Dark Elves, and the Coast will take this match. If we take a look at the after battle report, cannons really kind of failing at what they were trying to do. They were trying to snipe out these Reaper Bolt Throwers earlier on, and that was definitely a very good pick by Ice Power. These Reaper Bolt Throwers do exceptionally well against the Vampire Coast artillery pieces. You pretty much have to either ignore those Reaper Bolt Throwers or pray that the Dark Elves did not bring enough to deal with your own artillery. Morghuls, a very good pick against the Dark Riders. I think the Dark Riders really suffered heavily in this matchup. They got some charges in onto a lot of the handgun units, but the fact that there was just so many handgun units and the additional summons of the handgun mob was able to pretty much delete a Dark Rider unit each time it tried to charge in. So I think the Dark Elves, they either needed to consolidate their cavalry forces and charge them all in at once, or they had to really kind of work on the edges, because as soon as one unit got in range, there was 3 or more handgun units that just completely devastated their formation. But otherwise, yeah, Luther just refusing to die at the end also played a big factor in that. Witch Elves almost able to finish him off with the assistance of the Dark Shards, but Luther would not be denied today. But yeah, that will be our match for today. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.